So if you've been here over 23 years ago, then you might have been here before I was here. But if you've been here in the past 23 years, I might have seen your face before. I'm glad you're here. Even if it's the first time, and mothers, we especially salute you. And we have several little ones around today. It's so exciting. Some of these are visiting. And if you want to come stay, make Central your home, you're welcome to do that. We're glad you're here. I have a lesson that I hope you'll find encouraging and uplifting. My goal is to draw us all, including myself, near to God, to remind ourselves of the commitment that we should have with Him and His faithfulness and love to us. And that's in that Psalm 704. We do that from time to time here. Not every Sunday, but maybe every other one or close to it. It's the two greatest commandments, according to our Master. This morning we're talking about a mother and her prayers. 1 Samuel chapter 1 and 2 of the Old Testament. It's a story of a woman who prays on her pathway to becoming a mother, and also the amazing thing that she did finally after getting to be a mother. You might find that a bit unusual. So a child was asked one time, why did God give you your mother and not somebody else's? She said, because we're related, that's why. Just makes sense. Hillary came in and said, Mom, I just bring you these flowers. I just picked them out of the yard. She said, that's so sweet, honey. She says, I hope the neighbor wasn't watching while I did it. Kids have some funny ways of doing things. My favorite story, and I read this back some time ago, was about a soldier who was in basic training, and his mother sent him a package of cookies. The drill instructor did not like any of his guys receiving any kind of packages from home. He'd instructed them already of such, and yet Mom sent the package of cookies just the same. The drill instructor looked down at him, brought all the guys around in front of him, and said, I'll make a lesson out of this. Soldiers, you got two options. You can either throw those cookies away, or you can do one-arm push-ups while you're eating them in front of all of us. The soldier said, not a problem. Opened up the box of cookies and started eating them while he did one-arm push-ups. Struggling through every one of them, I couldn't even begin to do one. I used to, one or two. Couldn't even begin to do one today. Toward the end of those, as he was barely surviving those one-arm push-ups with a mouthful of cookies, he finished everything and he stood up, kind of coughing a bit, cookies still in his mouth. And he said, boy, that was a lot simpler than telling my mom I threw away those homemade cookies. We appreciate your moms. They've done a lot for us. And we appreciate the Father in heaven who gave us mothers who provide for us and gave us a lot of good teachings. There's so much to be said in the Old Testament and the New Testament about that. But 1 Samuel chapter 1 and 2. This amazing mother named Hannah. We'll start in by just reading what's going on here. It's an unusual story that brings about a great leader in God's kingdom because of this mother and her prayers. Now there was a certain man of Ramatham, Jotham, of the mountains of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Joram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, and the son of Ephraimite. Aren't you glad you didn't have to pronounce all those? I just kind of breezed through them. I'm not sure if it's right or not. Okay? And verse 2. And this guy, Elkanah, he had two wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. We'll stop right there and just talk for just a couple of moments. We're talking about the background here of this unusual woman, Hannah, and her pathway of striving to get to be the mother that she wanted to be. And it starts right out by telling us she had no children. Now, if you were of Israel background, back in those days particularly, and even any mother nowadays will look at that and think, oh, bless her heart, because you know she wants some. But in that day and time, it was more than just bless her heart. And more than a woman wanting to have children. This was almost like a scourge to her. And so as we look at the background of this woman, she has a problem. She feels like she is a failure. Now, there are women today that might feel like that if they're wanting children desperately, and I've known some that have struggled through this and the desires to have it and feel like they failed. Well, Hannah was that way. She felt like she was a failure, first of all, to her God. Because as you're looking at the situation, you're seeing that there were two wives that Elkanah had. This was fine according to Israel customs. And he was a faithful Jew. But in this process of time, one of his wives weren't giving any children. The other one was, which is evident that the problem is not the man, it's the woman. And there's something going on, she's probably thinking in her life, that she's done wrong. And she's probably sorting through this, as any one of us do, man or woman. If something's not going your way and you're striving to have it, you're looking up to heaven, if you're a faithful believer in God, and you're thinking, what have I not done right? Have I sinned in some way? And she's going through this and thinking, what is going wrong here? She was a failure. She felt like she was a failure to herself, I'm sure. She's a failure to her husband. She's probably moaning around sometimes in the house thinking to her, talking to her husband, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why God has done this. I feel like I'm just nothing. Women, you know, that happens sometimes. And guys too. You just feel like things aren't going that way. I'm a failure to God. Perhaps I've just not done right. And you're going around and all the other women seem to be having children, including the other woman that your husband belongs to, and yet you don't get to have it. This is a terrible emotional background time for her. As you read on verse 3 here, so the man, this man, Elkanah now, he went up from the city yearly to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. Special place, special family, very religious in their background. This one woman's going along and she's parading all of her kids, and the other woman's trailing somewhere behind, probably feeling she's worthless. It's tough. You read on the rest of it here. And also the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, and the priests were there too. Now, there's some issues there you'll read about in Samuel. Take the time to look at that later. But verse 4, it says, now whenever the time came for Elkanah to make an offering, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to her sons and daughters. Look at, there's all kinds of kids in that side. But to Hannah, he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah. Although, this is their conclusion, the Lord had closed her womb. It's a tough time. Now, as you read on a little bit further here, and you look at verse 7, it says, so it was year by year, when they went up to the house of the Lord, that she, now this is Peninnah, provoked her, Hannah. And therefore she wept and did not eat. So it was not only a situation, microphone working here? I don't believe it is. Folks, be on. Let's stick with this microphone here. So it's not only a situation where she doesn't have children, but the other woman has all kinds of them, and she's not sympathetic at all. She could care less. She probably is taunting her along the way, just saying all kinds of things like, anything you could come up with. Like, okay, you know who's the good woman in the bunch. You know who God cares about. You know who Elkanah really favors. And even though she's getting a double portion for the sacrifice time, she's not getting her satisfaction out of it. Verse 7, she's crying and not eating. Verse 8, and Elkanah, her husband, says to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? And why is your heart grieved? And bless his heart, this guy doesn't know what to say. And he says, hey, am I not better to you than 10 sons? She probably kind of looked at him with one eye closed and said, no, you're not. I want children and I want them now. I can imagine. And he should have known better than try to come up with that kind of sense. But he's trying to make some sense out of it all. And he's just trying to do what he can. A man would in that situation. It's affecting their relationship. She's crying, she's not eating. And this is not just one time. And it's not just when they go up to Shiloh year by year, but it's when they go back home. And all year long, every moment, every time she thinks about it. And when Penina comes along with all her children and come parading through like Mama Duck and all the little ducklings behind, here's her, poor old Hannah, and no children. Here, take some of mine and go watch over them here, maybe what Penina would say. And so nothing seemed to be going right. But read on here in verse 10. And she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed to the Lord, and wept in anguish. And then she made a vow. I want you to look at, as we look from the background to a prayer, because there are two prayers we're going to look at here about Hannah. One is a prayer that comes with a promise. The second is a prayer that comes with praise. So we've analyzed the background. We understand the situation. We know that there's a woman that's just grieving like you can't imagine. Maybe a few of you can, understanding where she's at. Antagonized by her cohort, I guess you would say, there within the household, and just in anguish with God. And she begins to pray. O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on my affliction of your maidservant, and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. And no razor shall come upon his head. That's a Nazarite vow there. Totally dedicated to the Lord is the impression being made by her there. And verse 12, and it happened as she continued praying before the Lord that Eli, this is one of the priests there, Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli, I'm not sure where he was thinking here, Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli says to her, how long will you be drunk? Can you imagine this? She's grieving. She can't eat. She's pouring her heart out. She's praying the process. And all she can be thought of is she's drunk. It's just trouble times. Put away your wine away from you, continues to say. Well, that wasn't a kind, understanding way of looking at the situation, but Hannah, just resolved within her heart, responds back and answers. Says, no, my Lord, I'm a woman of sorrow, sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. You want a definition of prayer? It's right there in that phrase. Pouring your heart out before the Lord. I'm sure everybody in this assembly has met some situations where they were grieving so much they couldn't eat. We're struggling, and even possibly now, with an issue in life, and you're talking to the Lord and you're pouring your heart out, your soul out before the Lord. This is Hannah's situation. And as she does so, she relates this now to defend herself to this person, defining what prayer is all about. The most sincere prayers, the most painful prayers are the ones that come out of times of grief, where you pour your heart out. And Hannah's defining it here for us to let us understand what's really being done. Verse 16, she continues on, do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and my grief I have spoken until now. Then Eli, I guess inspired of God here, being a priest, answered and said, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition, which you have asked him. And she said, let your maidservant find favor in your sight. And so the woman went away and ate, and her face was no longer sad. She becomes a trusting, prayerful person. She's been grieving all of these years. I'm sure praying all the way through, day in, day out. Every time they would go to Shiloh, year after year, every child that was being born to Penina, Prayers are being offered by Hannah, and why not me, Lord, please? All the way through all of her life, probably several times a day. And this is the first time that she's able to wash her face and go away saying, okay, God's going to hear me. I appreciate the fact that she understands that God hears prayers. I think part of the grief that she's going through in this prayerful time was to explain to us, to give us the lesson about prayer and the fact that God is here. It just has to come at the right time. So verse 19, they rose early in the morning and they worshipped before the Lord and returned and came home to their house in Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife. It's a relationship there more than just physical and mental understanding. And the Lord remembered her. Now the Lord doesn't forget us ever. When Samuel is writing this later on and he describes this term and he says, and the Lord remembered, it wasn't like the Lord was going, oh, Hannah over here, that's right, she's been praying. It wasn't that. It was the Lord finally granted her request. The whole time through, he was remembering her. He was taking note. He was right along with her through the painful process. It was just the right time. Prayers are answered at just the right time. Sometimes we give to our children things they don't need. Sometimes they get toys and all these other things, and they turn around and, parents, and they play with the box, don't they? You get them this great toy, you take it outside, they start playing with it, and look over, I know my grandson, and he picks up a stick and starts playing with it. It's like, I just bought you that. No, but the stick is more interesting, you see. Maybe the toy will be later. Timing is everything. And God's timing is perfect. So the latter part of verse 19, the Lord did remember her. And so it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son and called his name Samuel, saying, because I have asked for him from the Lord. The word Samuel means heard of God. He gets the name that assigns to him the fact that God hears prayers. You see that beautiful name that she gives the boy. Now Elkanah, verse 21, and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow. But Hannah, verse 22, did not go up. For she said to her husband, not until the child is weaned, and then I will take him, that he may appear before the Lord and remain there forever. Now we're looking at a second moment here. The promise that she made to the Lord when she prayed. She's going to fulfill it. Not quite yet, but Elkanah, careful about this, verse 23, her husband says to her, do what seems best to you. Wait until you've weaned him, only let the Lord establish his word. So the woman stayed and nursed her son until she had weaned. I'm thinking back to Elkanah in this situation. A man who loves one of the two women he's married to. The other one, at best, loves less, maybe not much at all. I don't understand the process. I don't know how you can marry somebody you don't love. But that's the situation, at least then. And yet, even to the child that now is to the woman that he loves, he wants her to hold fast to the promise that she made to God. She commits to that, and she says, I'm living faithful to it, and she'll do that. Verse 24. Now when she had weaned him, she took up with her 3 bulls, 1 ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord in Shiloh. And the child was young. Then they slaughtered a bull and brought the child to Eli, that's the priest there. And she said, O my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I'm the woman who stood by you here, praying in the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition which I asked of him. Therefore, I also have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord. And so they worship the Lord there. And an unusual thing that this woman has prayed for her whole life, only to turn around and give him back to God. She could have found probably 1,000 reasons why God wanted her to keep him. That he needed to have a mother that was loving and dedicated. Why turn him over to that priest Eli? And probably she's heard, as well as many in that area, that Eli's children really didn't behave like they ought to as priests. And now Eli's going to receive her son too. This isn't a good situation for parenting skills. And yet she does what she's promised to the Lord. Can't imagine what it was like walking home from Shiloh that day. Were they rejoicing? Were they sad? I'd say rejoicing. Because we have the prayer of praise then in chapter 2. And Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies." Maybe she's thinking, Penina, they're dead. She's trusting, because I rejoice in your salvation. No one is holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you, nor is there any rock like our God. I want you to see the second prayer that she's praying, because it's a prayer of praise. If you were turning over your only child to somebody else to raise them, would you turn around to God and offer a prayer of praise, as Hannah did? Her prayer of praise is reminding God that I know you've not forgotten me, and I nor have forgotten you and the promise that I've made, and the fact that you will do with my son what is best for him. There's a confidence in her that is just incredible in this prayer by this mother. She prays a prayer to start with to get to be a mother, and then as a mother, prays a prayer of praise in order to praise God for what she's been given. As we look at all these things, there's a couple of practical things I want to look at on this. First of all, number one, don't give up praying. Mother, father, grandparent, young person, old, whatever it is, don't give up praying. The example of Hannah just rings through. Now here's the question. Although it's not mentioned right here, as Hannah left her young son Samuel in the hands of Eli, do you think she stopped praying for him? Did she say, okay, that's it, Lord, prayers are answered, I don't have to worry about that anymore? With a message reminding us later on in this story here that every year she would go back up to Shiloh and rejoice. Remember the comment there, if you've read it before, that she would take a new robe to little Samuel every year, and bring to him. She hasn't forgotten this boy. She's still praying for him every day. Now he's there. She's going to pray a different prayer. But it's going to be a prayer that this person grows up to be what God wants him to be. Don't stop praying. Number two, as you're not stopping praying, remember to pray for your children. And don't give up on them. And as you're praying for your children, remember to pray for the rest of the children wherever you worship. Because these kids are going to have a tough time. Tougher than we could have ever imagined as adults now and what we grew up with. The world that they're coming into is going to be facing all kinds of things. I can't imagine even what they're facing today and what it'll be like by the time they reach adulthood. You pray fervently for those children. Pray for those parents also in the process, that they'll be raising them in the right way, in the way that this woman did. Can you imagine as young Samuel is saying goodbye to his mother and wondering, why are you leaving me? When she turns and walks away. And he understands the concept of commitment to God. That example has to be lived out by our adults today, before our children. So pray. Don't stop praying. Pray sincerely, as we see in this story here. Pray regularly for all of these people. Not just once in a while. But our children need our prayers. And keep your promises. If you're committed to God, keep your promises. Passage out of the Old Testament talks about promises from Psalm 15, verse 4. It says, regarding a certain person that should be honored, it says, he who swears to his own hurt and does not change. In other words, he makes a promise and later looks back and goes, oh, this will be tough to fulfill, but I'm not changing. Keep your promises to the Lord, as Hannah did. Elkanah had a lot of children. Later on, some more through Hannah that God granted her. A lot through Peninnah. There's only one name that we recognize. Samuel. The individual that understood the idea of prayer. That heard his mother praying probably lots of prayers when he was young. That understood the idea of commitment to when you make a vow to God, you live it, and you fulfill it, and you stay with it. Samuel is the person that grew up to be a leader of God's nation. A person who was a prophet and a priest. A person who would anoint kings in God's people, in his nations. Because of the mother he had. Because of the prayers she offered. And because of a God that remembered her. God remembers prayers. Practical lesson from a great mother. The pathway to becoming a mother because of prayer. And the honoring of God after that prayer is uttered in fulfilling it. And praising God along the way. Children are incredible. How much we learn from them because of God's gift as we look around and watch them growing up. They are a blessing. Don't take it for granted. Don't take the relationship that you have with God for granted. Pray often. Keep your relationship. Fulfill your vows to God. Live committed. And as you're looking at your life and you're analyzing where you're at today, are you where you ought to be in living your commitments to Him? Are you a Christian? And are you living faithfully? And if not, we close the sermon, as we always do, with a song. Words that will ring out in your mind and your heart, and you sing them and you think, do I need to respond? And if you do, then come down front while we stand and sing the song.
Yourself inside of the